From diplomacy to personal visions, we bring you inspirational stories of foreign ambassadors and diplomats across Thailand. Here on Radio Thailand FM 88. This is The Ambassador.
Good morning, สวัสดีค่ะ This is The Ambassador, a weekly program that invites foreign ambassadors to share with us diplomatic careers, lifestyles, and visions. I am Kimmy or Kim Paniknisa Grairek, your host. This episode, on the occasion of 75 years of Thailand's UN membership, we continued our UN month conversations with the UN country team in Thailand, focusing on the new UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework 2022 to 2026, which will guide the UN's work for the next 5 years in support of the Thai government to advance the Sustainable Development Goals. Joining us today is Mr. Graeme Buckley, Thailand Country Director of the International Labour Organization, or ILO.
My name is Graeme Buckley. I have been the Director of the ILO based in Thailand since 2017. And as my job involves being Country Director for Thailand, Cambodia and Laos PDR, and I'm also the Director of our sub-regional office covering East Asia, Southeast Asia and the Pacific. And before coming to Thailand, I was working in Geneva for many years at the headquarters of the International Labour Organization.
As part of the UN country team in Thailand, can you tell us more about the work you do and how it contributes to the collective work of the UN team?
Well, as I mentioned, I work for the International Labour Organization, and this is an agency, one of the specialized agencies of the UN. It has been in existence now for over 100 years. It is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, entity in the UN system. It was established in 1919, and Thailand was a founding member at that time. The Decent Work Agenda is the mandate of the ILO, and there are 4 elements to this. We work in the area of employment and enterprise promotion, promoting rights at the workplace, promoting social protection, and we are a tripartite organization, so social dialogue is the 4th pillar of the Decent Work Agenda. And what does this mean? This means the engagement with representative organizations of workers, trade unions, employers' organizations, and government, principally in the form of the ministries of labor, to implement and set policy related to the world of work. And since 2019, the centenary year of the ILO, we have been operating in Thailand with a Decent Work country program, which maps out precisely what we do in Thailand and what we will do over a 4-year period. And this Decent Work country program is integrated with and supportive of the UN's own cooperation framework. So we contribute in a very specific way in terms of our Decent Work agenda, but we engage in the UN country team to deliver on a whole range of dimensions of the cooperation framework, which you and the listeners will, I think, be hearing about over the coming weeks. So that is basically the mandate of the ILO, and we work, as I mentioned, very closely with a range of different partners around the table in the UN country team, but specifically in relation to those 4 elements of the Decent Work Agenda, as I mentioned.
Under the cooperation framework, there are 3 outcomes, right? Which are the inclusive and green economy, human capital development, and reducing inequalities. So what's your role in delivering the cooperation framework outcomes?
We have a particular focus on outcome 3, which is about people living in Thailand, especially those at risk of being left furthest behind, are able to participate in and benefit from development free from all forms of discrimination. That is essentially an outcome that is concerned with putting in place the enabling environment to address, as you indicated, inequality And there are two focus areas. One is to provide the enabling, rights-based, inclusive environment to address inequalities, support equal opportunities, and reduce poverty. And the other focus area is on good governance, the rule of law, and the social contract, enhanced for the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals acceleration. So this outcome, which is one of the three outcomes in the corporate cooperation framework, is a big outcome. It's very much about ensuring policy coherence. It's about operating as one. It's about establishing an integrated, interdependent, and mutually supportive set of interventions within the outcome, but also in relation to the other two outcomes. So each of the outcomes in the cooperation framework are quite interdependent and interrelated and mutually supportive, and all have obviously huge importance in helping Thailand to move towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals.
What are the three key things that must be done immediately for Thailand to shift gear on this issue?
This is quite a difficult question to answer because, as I mentioned, the outcome itself is very, very diverse. It's a big outcome. It's multidimensional. But if I was to focus on three key things, I would say first to place inequality at centre stage. One of the big challenges in Thailand, of course, is inequality, not just in terms of inequality of incomes and consumption, but inequalities of outcomes from the education system, inequality in terms of demographics, inequality in terms of the spatial dimensions, where you live, etc. So I think that the first thing that I would underscore is the need to place inequality at centre stage of all policy making and the implementation of those policies. Secondly, I would underscore the importance of empowering vulnerable groups, which is related to the first point, but in terms of Thailand's development, it is clear that there are certain groups of the population that have been left behind, that are, for one reason or another, vulnerable or marginalised. These include a lot of people who work in the informal economy, who work in agriculture. It also includes groups of people like the stateless and refugees and migrant workers, people that are not Thai but live and work sometimes in Thailand. And indeed, I think we can also identify that certain groups of older people and younger people are also vulnerable. So I think that it's very important that the development trajectory is one that is inclusive, and that means empowering those vulnerable groups to play their rightful part in the development process. And then thirdly, Thailand has, I think, developed a good social protection system for certain groups of the population. And it's become very clear in recent times with the experience of the COVID pandemic how important social protection is for the well-being and the development of the country. So the third key thing that I would underscore is to invest in expanding the coverage of social protection to include those vulnerable groups in order to address the challenges of inequality. So the three things would be to place inequality centre stage, to empower the vulnerable groups, and to invest in expanding social protection coverage.
What is the UN in Thailand doing in support this outcome?
There are a lot of activities undergoing, continuous policy dialogue in a whole range of areas of work. There is a substantive amount of work going into precisely to address the expansion of social protection coverage, to include, for example, informal economy workers, migrant workers, domestic workers, and to expand the coverage of children and young people. There's a lot of work going on to support decent work. I mentioned earlier on the importance of decent work and the different elements of decent work. One particularly important element to that is engaging in SME development, promoting social enterprises, particularly amongst those more vulnerable parts of the population, including as part of strengthening the economy and the society outside of Bangkok. That's part of a decentralization policy, and it's all part of good governance as well. As I've mentioned, we are doing a lot of work in supporting migrants, refugees, and stateless people.
Yeah.
Within the context, going back to SMEs and the empowerment of women in the economy, we're doing a lot of work to promote women in STEM areas, the science, technology, engineering, and maths, the ICT sector, and also working through a number of projects to address gender-based violence, which unfortunately is still a scourge in Thailand, like in many countries. This is something which we seek to address. And a lot of this work is overall aimed at promoting social inclusion, promoting the awareness about the Sustainable Development Goals and localization policies in the country, strengthening the rule of law and the accountability mechanisms between the state and non-state actors. So these are a whole range of things that are going into supporting this outcome to address the enabling environment for reducing the levels of inequality and increasing the participation and inclusiveness of the development process here in Thailand.
Any advice to the general public on what they can do to actively participate in this outcome, especially those including youth?
Well, very much building on what I said before, I think that there is a need for more inclusion in society in Thailand. So I think that people, perhaps especially young people, have a role to play in increasing participation and voice amongst both amongst themselves as young people, but also amongst those vulnerable groups that I mentioned before. And this can entail, for example, raising awareness about those groups and the rights that people have by virtue of being labour migrants, for example, or refugees or stateless people. So I think there's a lot that individuals can actually do in terms of raising awareness amongst their peers and in their communities about, more broadly, the SDGs, but about the elements of the cooperation framework of the UN and about the objectives, really, of addressing inequality and involving people in a more participatory development process in the country. Specifically, for example, this can mean addressing issues like, for example, the gender wages gap, ensuring equal pay for work of equal value. Addressing, making people more aware at all levels of society about gender-based violence, the importance of minimum wages, of decent work at the workplace, of participation of people in making, influencing and implementing policy, including at the decentralized level. So I think there's a whole load of levels of engagement that people, particularly perhaps young people, can play in raising awareness in their communities where they live about the importance of sustainable development goals and the role they play in ensuring the well-being and the welfare of everyone that is living in Thailand.
Okay. And finally, on the occasion of 25 years of Thailand's UN membership, would you like to leave your message?
Yes, I think one of there are many great achievements of the UN, and Thailand has played a vital role in the growth of the UN overall, and obviously the government plays a huge role in giving effect to the policies that are necessary to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So I would very much say, as part of the celebrations of the 75th anniversary, that people should go out there and promote and raise awareness about what all of those 17 Sustainable Development Goals mean and how everyone can play their part in ensuring that Thailand moves towards the achievement of as many of those goals as possible by 2030.
Okay. Thank you very much. ขอบคุณค่ะ
Thank you. ขอบคุณครับ
That was Mr. Graeme Buckley. Thank you very much. You can always find us at Facebook page Radio Thailand World Service and FM 88 Radio Thailand English to discover the rest of editions and other stories. And that's it for our program this week. Thanks for listening. I am Kimmy or Kim Paniknita Grairerk, so see you next time and enjoy the rest of the day. สวัสดีค่ะ
From diplomacy to personal visions, we bring you inspirational stories of foreign ambassadors and diplomats across Thailand, here on Radio Thailand FM 88. This is The Ambassador.